Welcome. My name's Orion. What's your full name?
Edward M. Myslivecek, with a middle initial M.
What does M stand for?
Martin. Martin, named after my grandfather. Martin Hummel, a German carpenter.
Where were you born?
Well, I was born in East Patchogue, Long Island, New York, it's about 35 miles from New York City.
And when was that?
In August of 6th, 1923.
Almost 100 years ago.
Yeah, it is, almost, yeah. It was before Lindbergh flew the Atlantic, and Babe Ruth was still swatting home runs and providing enough money to build Yankee Stadium, the home that Ruth built.
Yeah, Babe Ruth.
Mm.
What were your parents' names?
My mother was Catherine with a K, and her maiden name was Hummel, and my dad was Edward Myslivecek, and with no middle initial.
And where are your parents from?
Both of them were born in the United States, but their parents originally came, my father's parents came from Bohemia in Czechoslovakia. Bohemia is the industrial area of Czechoslovakia. And my mother's parents came from Germany. And both cases, they migrated to the United States. Came through Ellis Island and became citizens eventually.
What year did they come to the United States?
I can't remember that. I'm not great on that. I should know. The same as when my mother and father were born. They were both born in the New York City area, because that's where both families lived.
And your parents met in New York City?
Yes. They met actually in East Patchogue.
Ah.
My dad was in the ice cream business, another man, and it wasn't really ice cream, it was custard cream. And my mother worked at the lace mill in Patchogue, which made all of the big lace tablecloths. It was a big plant. And I don't know how they met, but they did meet. But it was after World War I, and my dad came back from the service and went into the ice cream business, and they must have met sometime in there. And I can always remember my mother saying that the boyfriends would always come around because she had two other sisters, and they'd come to see them. And she remembered she had one fellow that would bring a box of candy, and candy was expensive. It wasn't cheap. And she said this one guy would bring candy, and before the evening was finished, he would have finished the box of candy.
Oh my God.
So she decided, okay. So the next time he brought the candy, she switched the boxes for another box, in which she made the chocolate on it from Exlac.
Oh my gosh.
And the guy ate the whole thing up. Well, he never came back again. And Mom says, yeah, no trouble anymore. I thought that was overdoing it. But anyway.
Do you want to write it too? Mm-hmm. Where did you grow up?
I always lived in East Patchogue. I lived in a house that my father built, and it was made partly from a barn that he moved over from his parents' place. They had a barn for cows and horses, and That lower part of the house was all put together with pegs, not nails, but pegs.
Wow.
So it was a solid house. And we had a bathroom where my grandparents had an outhouse for years. And I lived pretty close to the elementary school, maybe a quarter of a mile away, so I could walk to school very easily. And that was a schoolhouse with 4 rooms in it. Each room had 2 classes. So you had classes 1, 2, and then 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7, 8. There was no kindergarten in those days. People didn't even know what kindergarten was. And I can still remember playing erasers on the head, walking up and down the aisle to see who could lose it and beat the other aisle, and games like that. And our fire drills were down an outside fire escape which rattled when we went down it. We were scared to death, but we had to go down it. And it was very, very good. And the principal, things were very tight. It was during the Depression. And so any piece of paper we would use, he would save it and make you turn it over and use it the next day or so. And I can remember that he was one that, when he was letting us sell candy, the 8th grade could sell candy at noon to make money for their graduation. You know, we're talking about making money like a total of maybe $5 or $6 for the year. And we would bring in the candy before the bell rang, after 12 o'clock, at 1, into his office, and he'd say, "How'd you make out?" And invariably we would say, "We made $2.50 or 98 cents or something like that." And he would look at us and he said, "You made what?" And then we'd stop and think. He said, "Who bought the candy? Who paid for that? You didn't make that much." And I can always remember that. You never say, "I made that much on something," because you have to deduct the costs before it to know what it was on the thing. I can always remember that lesson.
He was teaching you how to run a business.
Yeah, he was very good principal. Very strict, big paddle.
Oh no!
He used
Do you know what that means?
Oh, he used it, boy. Put your hand out or bend over, boy. And you knew it was there.
Wow.
And there were rough kids in there too, from Hegeman, which was all Italian, and a lot of Germans and all. I mean, they were rough ones, but he was a good principal. He was there for many, many, many years. God bless him. But and their graduation would be, they would set up a platform on sawhorses up on the 2nd floor, and the wall between those rooms could put aside, so you have 2 rooms, and everybody would be up there. Well, the graduating class was maybe 10 people, you know, so maybe you had 10 families there plus others, and I could always remember that. And I can remember that I was the executor of the class. I didn't know what it meant, but anyway, and I was giving a talk, and I said in my speech, "I am the executor of my class, and I'm here to bet." And everybody's laughing like mad. And I went, "What the hell are they laughing about?" But I remember executor and executive.
What were your interests, hobbies, sports as a kid?
In elementary school, we had no teams. We didn't play other schools. In fact, we didn't even know what a school bus was in those days. Everybody walked to get where they were going to school. Some people walked 4 and 5 miles to get to school. I was lucky to a short distance. And then by the time I got into high school, the buses started to pick us up and take us, because the high school was about 10 miles away. But there were no sports in the elementary group on it, but we built a baseball field next to my house in East Patchogue, cut this lawn down. We took old chicken wire and made a backstop, and made it so the pitcher's mound and everything else. And the fellows from Hegeman, which I said were basically Italian, the Sotos, the Nudos, the Paradisos, and so forth, they all came down. And because I was the only one that had a catcher's mitt, and I was the only one that had a first baseman's mitt, and I was the only one that had a mask. My father bought these for me. And I also had a bat and a ball. So they'd come down to play. They didn't have any of these things, not even a ball to play with. And we'd play all afternoon, had fun. And so that would be about the only neighborhood type of playing we played. As far as that, in high school, our high school only had soccer, so I played soccer. And they had no football, it wasn't big enough for that. And but they had a good basketball team that was excellent. And that was about it. Nothing particular to brag about.
Where did you go to school?
Where did
you go to school?
Where did I go to school?
Like, what were the names of your schools?
The elementary school was East Patchogue Grammar School, a wooden school. It's still there yet on Dutton Avenue. It has an addition to it now. And the 4 classrooms are still there yet. And the high school, I would have gone to Patchogue, but Bellport became a central school. And that's about 10 miles away from the house. And that was Bellport on the Great South Bay. And the school had East Patchogue students, Hegeman students, Bellport students, Brookhaven students, Yaphank students. There was 6 altogether. 6 schools sent people there. And our graduating class was maybe like 35. I mean, with all those people coming from all over the place. And it was a real mix of people from different communities all over. And it was a nice school, it was a good one. And I was glad I went there. And I can still remember the biggest hurricane that hit Long Island years ago, when the houses in East Hampton were washed right out to the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't know what a hurricane was. So at around 1 o'clock they said, you can go home, there's a bad storm. And so everybody leaves the school. And so we decided, well, we're going to walk down to the bay in Bellport, which were far from the school. And the road was lined with big oak trees. I bet every oak tree was at least 18 inches diameter, big ones. And as we went down, we looked, and every one of these trees were down. It had gone through while we were in school. We didn't realize it. And so we hear it starting to blow again, and I've since found out that a hurricane goes around in a circle. And so there was a calm at one point, and then it comes back again. Well, we were in the calm, didn't know it as we're walking, and all of a sudden the wind starts to blow, and I remember getting behind it, a big oak tree in which the roots were out, and the tree is down on the ground, on the side, away from the wind, to protect ourselves. And then when that blew over, we walked home. There wasn't much we could do on it, but it was quite an experience that everybody had then.
Hey, is Lynx next with questions?
Also, where'd you go to college?
Oh, I went to college. When I got home from the service, I went to work for Republic Aviation, installing test equipment on the new jet airplanes. And they sent me to Muroc, California, the Muroc Air Base, which is the Mojave Desert. And it was the big test base for the Air Force. And at that base, every plane you could think of was there. Every Russian, Japanese, the German V-2 rockets, everything was there. And Republic had their P-84, which was one of the first ones that the Air Force made as one of their major fighter planes later on. Anyway, they sent me out there to install test equipment. And while I was out there, I said, this is not very good. I was making 95 cents an hour. That was top salary, because I was away from Long Island.
Mm-hmm.
So they paid me an extra quarter almost for that. Anyway, so I said, there's got to be something better. And they said that the aircraft is laying off people. Well, that wasn't very good news either. So I started to go to college. And I tried to think of what college I go to. I applied for different ones. And I thought, I remember industrial arts was one of the nice courses in school. And so I applied, and one of them was Oswego. I had no idea where Oswego was. It was in New York, that's all I knew. Had no idea what it would cost or anything else. And I applied to them. I applied to a couple of others, and they sent back a thing, you're admitted. And I came back on the plane from New York Air Base. And on the plane that we were at, it was a C-47. There was a pilot and co-pilot. The seats, there were no seats. It's only bucket seats along the window. The window still had the holes in where you could have put a rifle if you had to. And 4 others, so there were 6 of us, 2 in the front, no oxygen. And so we went through the Rockies. We went through the Rockies, not over them, because we could not go higher than 8,000 feet because of the need for oxygen. And we made 3 stops across to get gasoline at different places, Albuquerque, and I forgot what was in Missouri. We stopped at 2 or 3 other fields to get gas, and then we were on our way to Farmingdale, which brought us up at around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was foggy. And the guy says, we're flying over Farmingdale right now. And we're looking out of the windows, and all we see is white. You couldn't see the end of the wing. It was so foggy. And so he's flying around, and we're listening to him. And on the east end of Long Island, they were making preparations for the spaceships out there. Grumman Air Base. And Grumman called in and says, this is Calverton. Calverton says, we're going to have it clear here in a couple of minutes, but it's fogging in very fast. So it's visible. So we've been flying in that direction, and at least we thought he was anyway. And then not Yonkers, but an air base up in Peekskill called in and says, we are going to be clear here for the next 30 minutes. If you can make it, you'll be okay. Well, he says, we have only 10 minutes of gasoline left.
Oh no.
And Hartford came in. And Hartford said, if you can make it, it's supposed to be clear here in just about 8 minutes or so. Well, he had to just go across the Sound at Hartford, and we were all at the window, and I can still remember that in my head. I'll never forget it. We're only at about 4,000 or 5,000 feet. We're not up high, low. He couldn't go too low because he didn't want to hit something, but he didn't want to go too high. And we're flying, and we're all looking and saying, there it is. And as we're looking through the white, it's like somebody took their hand and pushed the clouds this way, and right there was a cross. It was Hartford's airstrips.
Wow.
It was a cross. And he sees it, the pilot, he was a great pilot, and he took that plane and we went down and nosedive. All of us fell on the floor because we're not strapped in anyway. And by the time we got up, he was on the ground and he had stopped and he opened the door and we got out. You couldn't see the end of the wingtip again.
Wow.
Fogged in, just like that. I can always remember that cross was there.
Very lucky.
Really, really, really good. And all of us, it was just amazing that it happened the way it did, because we never made any place else without a crash.
How much gas did you have left when you landed?
I think he had a gallon.
Okay.
He said, there's enough to smell. Because he didn't even go from where he hit the ground. he just stopped right there because the engines were ready to stop anyway. So he said, they'll bring the gas trucks out here first. And I always remember that. He was a great pilot because he could not go over the Rockies. He went through them. So I have pictures in which I took pictures of the tops of the Rockies, the snow, and he wove through those things. He'd been an Air Force pilot overseas during World War II, so he knew what he was doing. And he was very, very good on that. But he knew just what he was doing on it without wasting gas and all on that. But he wouldn't have wasted the gas. He did miscalculate the fact that if the fog was there, so when he got to Farmingdale, he said, gladly, we'll go out to Calvert. There goes 100 gallons, and he goes this way. So anyway, that was it. So I came home, and the next day, I get in my car, I look on a map to find out where Oswego is, because I had my little letters saying you're admitted for the summer. And it was starting, the classes were starting in the June the 30th or something like that, just before the 4th of July. And I got in the car, and the only way you're going to get up is to go through New York, the White Plains, and they go all the way up the east coast of the Hudson River to the Tappan Zee Bridge, cross underneath Albany, go through the Coalskill, and where all the Indian fighting was in there, and then up to Oswego. And I got there and I found out where it was, and I started class the next day. That's how I got to Oswego. And I'm glad I went, because there weren't too many people there then yet. And that's when they were starting. A lot of veterans were coming then too. Thank goodness. Worked out very good. Very pleased.
All right, Lynx has the next question here.
What did you major in?
Well, they called a bachelor's degree, and it was basically was a teacher's license, specializing in industrial arts, vocational work, carpentry, metalworking, sheet metal. So for any one of those, I could teach separately as far as that was concerned. And I really enjoyed that. When I was at Oswego, to make money, because the government was paying you $21 a month to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
Now that you were married,
Yeah.
$21, how much are you going to buy for that? And that's to pay for your rent and everything else.
Wow.
And so I was always looking for a job, and most of the other fellows did too. And so one of them was working for the McPhail Candy Company in Oswego. They were a big candy factory that competed against, was it Whitman's chocolates?
Mm-hmm.
They were the competitor with Whitman's. And they made a box almost like it. But they also sold all the candy that 5 and 10, McCullen's and all these other stores sold. They made Christmas candy, the hard twisted candy and so forth. Peanut brittle they made. I mean, it was a 2-story building. And they needed people to mop the floor every night after the last shift left, which was at 4 o'clock. And we would come in at 4 o'clock. There were 4 of us, and we get the buckets with the lime. Was it lime? I guess they used lime or whatever it was they used. Very caustic, and scrubbed all the floors. Scraped them first because there was candy on it. Scraped them, and then went over it with a clean one. So by the time we were finished, that floor was all clean, and it was big, under machines and everything else. And they made a lot of the candies that are like orange slices, lime slices. You know, they had sugar on the outside. They made a lot of that, and the conveyors would go and it would drop off on the floor and be smushed in it
Sticky.
and so forth. And they always made that, because people say don't say it, they made the nigger babies, little black ones. Oh, were they good? Oh, they were delicious. But and then once in a while they'd have us with a hammer breaking up the peanut brittle on the big tables with a hammer, bang, 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 and then put it in bins to be shipped out. But that was very good. Then another job I had at Oswego was a foundry. Needed people to turn the foundry. In a foundry, you make a mold in sand, and there's a special sand that has to be tempered, the right amount of moisture in it every night. So in the morning when they make it, it'll hold itself a little bit. And so we would come in after they finished pouring. They made New York vices. It was a big vice they made, sold all over the world. And they would pour that before we got there, and then we would shake with a crane, shake it out, and the sand would go in a big pile, and move those hot vices, which still had all of the metal on it, to a pile that would be taken care of the next day. And then we'd start shoveling this stuff and putting moisture in it. And by the time we finished, it was pretty late, and I can still remember getting home and getting into a tub, and the tub was just brown.
Wow.
I mean, the water was, so dirty. And we did this for a while, because that was a part-time job. So I had a lot of little odds and ends jobs like that, which you were glad to get, because everybody wanted it too. Everybody was trying to work and make a little extra. But anyway, that's
And
it.
you learned things from the jobs
That they
too.
were terrific. You knew that you didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
And it's still made the same way. Those founties are still the same way. It's interesting. And the candy factory, I think it's out of business, the candy factory now. But that was an interesting one.
All right, next
Anyway.
question.
Where did you like teach at?
When I was going to do my student, well, I figured I'm not one to sit around in college taking classes any longer than I have to. And I found out if I took Saturday classes and evening classes, that I could in a year make enough credits for another year, which I did. So every night I took classes, not every night, but most nights, and then every Saturday, and I had 16 credits by the time the end of the year was there. So I really graduated in 3 years. And on my last year, which would be the third year, like in January, I was now going to go out and student teach. The schools all had student teachers. And they were sending me to Islip, and which I was glad, because Islip was near East Patch Road. And so that was before Christmas. And just before Christmas, I get a phone call from my mother saying, give a call to Bellport, to Babylon High School, Mr. Proctor. And I did, and he said, please come in for an interview. And I went in, and he said, you were recommended by the college, which meant the college approved me not going to do the student teaching. And he said he recommended you highly, and we're offering you this position. But I must warn you that the teachers had a heart attack. The kids are really rough. They're motley, they're disorderly, they're everything. He said it's be a real difficult deal. I said, hey, what can be worse than Pacific? You know? So I think I mentioned he called them all together the first day of the school year, which was only in January then, and he had over 100 of them were there, all the students, and they looked big. They were all big boys, and he told them this is going to be the final chance to have this class run right. It was more than one class, there were 6 of them. And so he introduced me, and I didn't say much, The next day this class had started, and I remember that every night I stayed at the school until maybe 10 o'clock. And I remade all of the tool panels and made them into something really nice. Before it was kind of haphazard, and and the kids would come into class the next day, and they would actually stand at the door before coming in. Is this the right room? And then I got a couple of them to ask if they could come in and help.
Aww.
And they were real good. We got and then at the end of the seniors graduated, which was at the end of 3 years. they dedicated the yearbook to me.
Wow.
I have a yearbook, my picture in the front as being dedicated, which I thought was quite a thing in those days. So
It's an honor.
that was that. And then I left there and went to Garden City thinking I would do better. And thinking and actuality are two different things. they don't always compare favorably. But once you put your foot in the soup, it's wet.
How long were you there for?
Oh, gee, Garden City was 20 some odd years there.
Wow.
26, 7, I can't remember now, something like that. Yeah, but it was good. But all the time I worked there, I had other jobs. I worked in a card factory, and in a card factory, which was in West Babylon, they had a great big steel table. It was like 12 feet by 6 feet, and on top of that were pieces of paper, full table on the steel. And they gave you a hammer with a point on the end of it, like a tack hammer. And you grab the end of the stack, and these were each a card, a greeting card. So on this big thing, you might have had over 100 cards. And you grabbed so many of them, and you took the hammer, and you hit, so you didn't hit the card, you had to hit just off the line, and you eventually got it all the way down, and you pulled it out, and did it, and did it, and did it, and you did that to the whole thing, and until all these cards were separated. So during the day people would come and paint whatever they had to, or whatever they had to work on, and put them together. And that was hard work, very hard work, meticulous. And so that was one of the jobs. And of course, then I decided if I'm going to be a salesman, I'm going to sell fire alarms. And I developed a company, Fire Alarm Protection Company. And I met that man from Philadelphia, and I didn't sell many of them, but I put a lot of different ads in. And I can still remember going to the radio station thinking, boy, if you go to the radio station, you make $1 million. They hear you right away. Boy, they come to the door and ask. And so they said it was so much money, and I said I couldn't quite afford it. They said, well, we'll give you a couple of spots in the morning early when people get up for breakfast. That's when they hear it. And so I went along with it for 6 months. It didn't bring one customer in, bring nobody in. I asked them, do you have any statistics on how many people your programming brings in? And they said, we don't keep that. You know what I mean? So there's no assurance when you hear these ads that they're making any money on them whatsoever, but it's still costly on it. So a lot of things I learned. It was an interesting time to do that. But and then of course the volunteer fire department, that was great. Worked that there were many mornings, nights that the alarm would go off like at 12 o'clock, and I'd get home at 6 in the morning after racking hose and everything else, because after the fire was over, every piece of hose in those days had to be racked on a rack so it would drain. Otherwise it would get moldy and would rot. And so that had to be, and then you put dry stuff on the truck then. So after the fire was over, there was hours of work yet that you had to do on it. And this was all volunteer, and we all enjoyed it. It was really good, very, very good that way. But anyway.
What's your next question?
Sorry about that.
Oh no, you're good.
What do you think your favorite job was? Was it teaching? Or?
Favorite job? I enjoyed teaching. I really enjoyed it. It was. I thought it was very, very good. I had no trouble with students, and where other teachers would complain about them, nice as can be, as long as they were getting something, or you gave them something too, and it was good. But I enjoyed it, even though it was a long ride. It was 25-mile drive every morning, and every night coming home. And I had to do the soccer for nothing for 15 years, which brought me home sometimes like late at night, 9 o'clock or later, which made an awful long day. but you accepted it, and it went by, and it went well on it then. But you have to do your own thing. You can't worry about other people, because they got their own problems. And it worked out good. I was very, very pleased with what I had there. And they built a brand new high school 2 years after I got over there. And none of the old ones wanted to draw up the schematic or anything else of the shop plans. And they said, Ed, you're going to go to the high school, you do it. You know, and I'm supposed to make one for the wood shop, for the metal shop, for the art room, for the photography, and the drafting room, all these. And I spent hours drawing on this paper. Like on the metal shop, I had every machine, the location, how far out it would be, the cabinet would be there, the number of the cabinet, where the sockets were. I mean, I had everything on this thing. I think of what I did, and I could never do it today. And I presented them with that. They made it exactly what I had, the position of it. I asked for the flooring. I didn't want concrete floor. I asked for wood block flooring, and it's coated with tar, like black.
Why didn't you want concrete?
And you could walk on that blacktop all day long and never feel tired.
Okay.
It was soft, and it was quiet. And if you dropped something, it didn't clang. It was there. It was really good. We had concrete under the auto section, where the car lift was, stuff like that. And where the big lathes were, but not where the working conditions, where they stood and wore. That flooring was just magnificent. I know it wasn't too deep, and they were black. They were coated, but they were really nice, and they swept up nicely. You know, really nice job. The custodians used to like it too. So we're very happy with that. That was only in the both. No, in the wood shop it was wood floors, and that was different. And the photo lab, you thought you were going to a dungeon. You turned this way, that way, back on yourself. So nobody could, when you got in, you weren't sure if you'd get back out. But anyway.
What do you have next?
Would your students ever would you ever tell them stories about when you were overseas or just your other jobs and stuff?
No, do I ever tell them? Did I ever tell them? No.
Yeah, did you ever tell your students stories?
No, I didn't. No, that's interesting. I don't think I mentioned once about the military or anything else. No, I never mentioned anything, and I don't know if they've been interested in that for sure. And I would listen to a lot of their stories. I usually ask, does anybody have a problem this morning? And somebody say, John, what is your problem? And they'd say something happened, and I'd say, anybody got any answers for it? And they might have some idea. Okay, well, we discussed that. Let's go to work now. And they'd go to work. And
Well, that's so smart.
we had a kind of they were good. At first, when they came in, they were toughies, but everybody had a seat, did what they were doing. And after a while, they were very, very compatible. And in all those years, I never had one tool stolen or misplaced.
Wow.
Everything went back, every bit of it. And we had some beautiful automobile sockets and wrenches. I mean, they were expensive stuff in there. Real good ones on it. But it was good because we did arc welding,
Holy cow.
and we had gas welding. I used to love the gas welding, of course, with brazing. We had the furnaces for melting aluminum or any kind of metal. Really could get hot in there. We did the lathe work, any kind of lathe work you had. We had a big lathe, one with 10-inch circumference, and the others were 8-inch ones, smaller ones. And we had planers, metal planers, grinders, and we had every metalworking tool you could think of, everything from shears to hammers to benders and so forth, arbor presses and so forth. And we could do all auto work. We had an auto lift that would lift the car all the way up. And trying to think, we did foundry work, any kind of casting. We could do casting, which was kind of fun. And just about everything you want. Wrought iron, we did a lot of wrought iron work, welding of wrought iron and so forth. That lamp over the dining room table, I made that by hand. Turned the middle part out of cherry, and then bent the wrought iron, painted it for decorations, soldered, welded, soldered. Anyway, but it was good.
When did you like move to Florida?
In Florida, I would not have come to Florida as early as I did, but we found this spot, Venice, some years before, and the principals were getting kind of, not mean, but inconsiderate. And they would want you to do things and they would threaten you if you didn't do it or something like that. They were more worried about their job. They weren't worried about you in the least. And an example, I took one student down that was smoking in the hall. And in Garden City, there were many that did that. And the class had already started. So I took him down to the principal. The school was a U-shaped. And the principal was off to one end. Took him down to the principal's office, took him in, I told him I found him smoking, and I left him. I walked back around this horseshoe. Coming from the other direction is a student I just dropped off. And they always call him Mr. M, because he's in Myslivecek. Hi, Mr. M. Have a good day. And he continues down to his class. The principal had told him, Mr. Myslivecek must have had a hard day today. Go back to your class. This is the attitude that they had in those days, starting to get that way. And I said, no, I don't want to be bothered with this. This is ridiculous. I'm going to get some kid that's going to do something wrong, and I'm going to get blamed for it. And I had enough time in. I said, I'm going to retire. So I retired, and we came down to Florida, and we went into the Parkdale West, which was built back in the 70s. And I noticed that the sounds from upstairs were very notable. I said, wait a minute, this is supposed to be concrete floors. So I checked out. There were no concrete floors, there were wood floors. So I went to the builder, who was still building in town. He said, I'm sorry, because he had built a couple of other places, all concrete. And that's the ones we had looked at. And I went to him and I said, what happened? He said, you know the year it was built? I said, yeah. He said, you remember a company named Walt Disney? I said, yeah. He said, well, Walt Disney, for the 2 years I was building that building, took every bag of cement that crossed into Florida. Every bag. And I can remember people complaining, going down to the lumberyard, you couldn't get a bag of cement because Disney was building. Nobody realized. And they had taken all of it. And he said, so I had to use the best thing I could. So I used the concrete I had for my walls and every place else, and the sidewalks. And then he said, I put the wood floors in. I had no choice. And I could understand. There isn't much you could do about it. And so I said, I'm selling this. So we sold that, and we bought a place in Nokomis, a single floor one with nobody over us. That's how I got there then. But I came down because of the retirement from the school, thinking I've served my time, let somebody else worry about it. And amazingly, the year after I went out, they ripped the whole thing apart and made it into a classroom. I don't know.
Oh no.
This is the kind of thinking you had, you see. The schools were ridiculous. The administrations, worried about themselves. That's people that we have today. That's our problem we got today. They ask a principal something, they're scared as could be. So anyway,
What year? So what year did you move to Florida?
and I decided, why stay in Babylon?
Yeah.
What am I going to do there? So I came to Florida, we moved down here, and I said, well, what am I going to do? And I said, I know what. And I met a guy that was in real estate. Of course, I remember I had bought one, sold one, and we also bought a piece of property down by the airport to build a house on. So I knew that real estate, and there were only about maybe 30 realtors in all of Venice, and maybe 3 companies. And I said, oh, I'll go into real estate. And I can remember I went in and I got my license in '79, and I remember on the 3rd year, there was a bank that gave a plaque out to anybody that sold $1 million worth of real estate. Now, the value of real estate would be the value that it sold for. So if you sold something for $50,000, now that's $50,000. If it was your listing, you could double that then, make $100,000. But you had to get it to $1 million, and no one had ever gotten one of those awards yet. No one. And I think on the 4th year I was there, I was one of the first ones to receive that award. Didn't mean a damn thing. I got this little plaque. It's in here somewhere in there. And
That's a good job.
I felt comfortable, and I worked for down on Venice Avenue, across the street from where you're staying, is a place called Home and Condo. It's a rental, and that building was the building of St. Armand Circle Real Estate, and I worked there for St. Armand Circle, and that one I had to leave after 2 years because the broker took the money that was in escrow and used it to fix his boat. I mean, he was from St. Armand's, and I can always remember we'd go up to St. Armand's for a meeting every once in a while, and when we went up there, St. Armand's had their collars on, tie, shirts. So we're from Florida, Venice. We come down in short sleeves, look good, but no tie or anything. And we'd walk in, they'd look at us like a bunch of bums, They hated us. So anyway, that was always interesting until their broker fouled up and robbed them blind, So I left that, and I went with Bill Cutler. And at that time, a dentist, had an apartment house on Menendez, 2-story, and he wanted to sell it. And I met this Bill Cutler, who was a realtor, and he said, you want to go in together, we'll buy this thing. The guy would take a big mortgage on it. Then we had very little down. So we let's do it. And we did. It was a 2-story apartment. It had 14 units in it. And I forgot how many years we worked on that every day, fixing plumbing, repairing leaks, everything else. It was a good experience. It was very, very good. So we had that, and it was an interesting aspect as to investment and rentals.
And what was the name of that?
It was what the name we named it, the Village. I forgot now. They took the name down that we named it. It's there, and it's still there. The building was built in 1923. So all the piping, when there was a leak under the sink, we would fix it, and it would come down as lead piping. Then the lead would go into cast iron, and then it went into copper where they improved it, then into cast iron in the wall. And we're trying to repair this. And the fixtures and all, only one place, ABC Liquor, ABC, the hardware store, had parts for that. But it was interesting.
And then the last real estate agency that you were at, what was that
With
called?
Paradise Realty.
Yes.
I went with them. In fact, It was very good. Tim Paradiso was the broker, and he was very, very good to me, and I think I was very good to him. And I liked that. I enjoyed it very much. It was good. But you worked. It was not necessarily easy, always.
And when did you retire from
And
there?
I took care of the rentals on that too.
Oh, nice.
Those were problems, really problems. I mean, people were as liars as lying could be. I'd never believe anybody, you know. The more sincere they sound, the more you question it, you know.
Wow.
It's terrible, terrible. It's the different things that we had. People that say we have no animal, then when they move, the place has fleas in it that are so bad that every piece of furniture has to be thrown out. I mean, and people that had a pool that was so green that they had to come in and almost destroy the pool to rebuild it. I mean, just awful, awful things that went on. And these are the nicest people in the world, you know. But anyway, it was a good experience, and I was with them just a couple of years ago.
This is when
I had my license until 2 years ago. My license, but to get your license, you had to go take the class, pay $400 and some odd or something like that,